Hello, welcome to American Baker in Germany. I'm Michelle, and we are continuing our Baking Basics series with learning how to level a cake today. Let's get started. There are a couple ways to level a cake, and my favorite way is just with a regular old bread knife. This is just a serrated knife. Serrated means it has teeth, so it comes down with little teeth on it. And you use a long serrated knife, and a long serrated knife is a bread knife. It's usually not super sharp, although I wouldn't test it out on your hand, but it's sharp enough to cut through the cake, and it's the most effective way to level a cake, in my opinion. Now what I do is I look around the cake. I have it on a turntable. This is also called a Lazy Susan. It looks like this, has a bottom, and then the top turns around. I would recommend getting one of these if you want to level cakes, but you don't have to, it's up to you. You could also turn it with your hand, but you could leave fingerprints on it as well. So what I do is I find more or less the lowest spot on the cake, on the top surface of the cake. Now this one has kind of a large lip onto the cake, so I might not cut off that lip. So otherwise I'd be cutting off like most of it. If I cut it off, I'd be like way down here, and then I'd have maybe 1.5 centimeters, like half an inch at most. And I want it to be a little bit deeper than that. So I think I'm going to leave a little bit on the side. And right here is the lowest spot, I think. If you look at it. So I'm going to start with my knife here. I'm just doing this to show you, but I'm not going to actually do it this way. Because what I have to do is I hold the knife steady and then turn the table to allow it to cut it. And it's very difficult from this angle with my hand backwards like this. So what I'm going to do is put my hand over and turn it right side up, and I'm going to start here. I'm right-handed, so I have to do it on this side. I'm just going to hold the knife steady as flat as I can and turn the table and let the table do the cutting. I'm not moving the knife at all. I'm just turning the table. There we go. It can get a little bit crumbly. Don't worry too much about that. As long as you're trying to keep it nice and steady. There, as soon as it starts to move, then it's done. Now it can sometimes happen that a crumb or two moves around where it shouldn't. You can just kind of press it back in. The middle got a little bit squishy, but that's all right. It's still really lovely. And now that's really quite level, even without cutting off the edge. And once I go to frost the cake, I can fill in all the tiny little gaps that we have. But as long as it's mostly level, then it works fairly well. Now, another good thing about it is this part right here are cake scraps, and you get to eat those. So I give these to my kids all the time, which is why I only bake lactose free, because my 5-year-old loves cake scraps. So, I used to think it was wasteful to level a cake, but that's because I didn't used to spread my batter around, and I had a really big hump, and the sides were really, really low, and then the top was really high, and it was like half of my cake. So once you get to a point where you can move it around so that the cake doesn't rise quite as much, then it's not nearly as wasteful, and it makes your decorated cake so much prettier and so much more professional looking that I always level them now. Alright, one thing that I like to do is I usually bake ahead of time, like maybe the week before. Usually it's pretty typical for me, but you can also do it a couple of weeks before, or even the day before. What I do then is I wrap up my cake in aluminum foil or plastic wrap, sometimes both, depending, and I freeze it so that I can always work on a cold cake, because cold cakes are so much easier to decorate than warm cakes. This one's still a tiny bit warm, but it's mostly cool. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up in aluminum foil so you can see how I do that. You don't have to do this. If you don't want to do this, you don't have to. If you want to bake the cake the same day that you're going to decorate it, you do that. Okay? I'm not telling you that everybody has to do it my way. I'm just showing you how I do it. I carefully fold the aluminum foil around the cake and flatten the corners. I go ahead and leave the edges because you don't want it freezing with something underneath it, then it will make it kind of do this across the top of it, and we just don't want that. So, so I'm going to lay it really nice and flat, just like this, into the freezer. Make sure that whatever is underneath it is also flat. So on top of a box, or at the bottom of the freezer, or on the bottom of the shelf of the freezer, depending on what kind of freezer you have. I actually was going to show you a cake leveler, but mine is terrible and just made a mess of my cake. So instead I will just say that the serrated knife is by far the easiest way to level a cake, in my opinion. I'm sure there are cake levelers that work, but I don't happen to have one. Hope you enjoyed the tutorial today, and we'll see you again next time.